I'm Lee Doherty Biddison.
And I'm Carolyn Kamsty-Fowler, and we're your co-hosts for the Johns Hopkins Office of Wellbeing's podcast, Vital Conversations, Influencing Workplace Wellbeing in Healthcare.
We spend a lot of time thinking about how to influence workplace well-being in healthcare, and we're excited to share what we're learning.
Thank you for joining us.
Hello and welcome to this episode of our Vital Conversations podcast. I'm your host today, Lee Doherty Biddison. I'm Chief Wellness Officer for Johns Hopkins Medicine, and I have the privilege of welcoming my friend and colleague, Dr. Carolyn Kamsty-Fowler, Executive Director for Nursing Wellbeing for Johns Hopkins Medicine. Carolyn, so excited to do this today.
Oh, Lee, I'm always happy to do podcasts with you, my friend. And I'm grateful that we are going to be talking about gratefulness today. It's one of my favorite topics. And I think it's sometimes under-recognized by many of us for the potential for its impact on well-being. It's really significant.
So important. So gratitude. What do we mean, Carolyn, when we're talking about gratitude? I know what I mean when I'm encouraging my 6 and 10-year-old to express gratitude and say thank you for things that have been done or given to them. But I think we're trying to go deeper than that. So say a little bit more about what we mean.
Right. So we are kindred brainwashers when it comes to saying please and thank you, although mine are 33 and 31. Let me just refer immediately to Dr. Robert Emmons. He's somebody who's written and researched extensively in the field of gratitude. And I think that certainly the way that I think about the importance of gratitude is influenced by him in no small measure. What Dr. Emmons says is that when we live gratefully, so we're moving beyond just saying thank you, we're moving into this realm of grateful living. And when we are living gratefully, we're able to recognize that there are so many sources of goodness that are outside of ourselves. And whether that source of goodness is a person, or perhaps it's just an opportunity, something that we may take for granted, the fact that we have clean water to drink, or we have a safe home to live in, or we had the opportunity for higher education, whatever that is, often we take those for granted. And so therefore we're not reaping the benefits. And so the process of gratefulness really is almost like a two-step process. We are affirming, first of all, that there are things that we're grateful for. And then we're recognizing the gifts that we've been given and the contributions of other people to the fact that things have been going well. So in a clinical setting, for example, if we've had a relatively peaceful, uneventful shift, right?
Those rare occasions.
Those rare occasions, or even if we've had a stressful shift, but because of the way our team worked together, we were able to avoid harm to a patient and we were able to support each other during the stressful moments of our shift. That's happened because of the contribution of so many of us into this situation. And we have received so much from each other. And we absolutely know and talk a lot about situations in which people were not there for us. And yet, when we are surrounded by resources and by support and by these gifts, whether they're human or otherwise, we often don't see them. We don't necessarily see them as we sort of are rushed along at that rapid pace of our lives.
It's so true. The rush changes everything, doesn't it? We just miss things that really matter. Well, okay, so we have this a little bit more full understanding of what we mean by gratitude, but this is a well-being podcast. We've built our work around well-being. What is the impact of engaging in gratitude in this grateful living for our overall well-being?
Well, frankly, they're far-reaching and very impactful. There are some people who've called gratitude the wonder drug, others who've called it vitamin G. But essentially, let's just break it out into 3 or 4 categories. So the first big category is the ability of grateful living to enhance our well-being and our life satisfaction. We just feel better about our life and the circumstances of our life. The second big category is that grateful living supports a higher quality of relationship and connection. If I am appreciating what you bring to my life or how we can make a difference together, then I'm connecting to you. And as you and I have talked about often, that sense of connection and mutual support is a powerful
It's
driver of
huge.
resiliency. Huge. It's also a fundamental human need to feel connected and supported.
Absolutely.
And also lead to better physical health. And the interesting thing about the impact on physical health is not only can it help with physical health, perhaps as our stress is reduced or we feel less isolated or less alone, but it's also been shown to increase our self-efficacy around the management of health conditions.
So
And
interesting.
yeah, isn't it? Isn't it? And as somebody who lives with those, I think it's true. It can be quite frightening to get a diagnosis or realize that perhaps we have to deal with something health related. And yet, our appreciation of the resources that are available to us and our appreciation for the care that we can receive, the support we can receive, can go a long way to having us feel less, sort of almost less victimized by whatever it is that we're living with. And then, of course, gratefulness is very supportive for our mental health. And part of that is because of the way that gratitude actually acts on our brain. And that I find absolutely fascinating.
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, you've probably heard, right? So the same way that carbs and sugar can do good things for our brain and not
Right.
good things for our health and our body, gratefulness can do the same thing. So the grateful living, the more we think about what we're grateful for, and the more we express grateful thoughts, the more we're going to see sort of the neurochemical responses to that. So gratefulness can boost the levels of our neurotransmitter serotonin.
Okay.
And it can also activate our brain to produce dopamine. And we all know the power of dopamine.
Absolutely.
So it can do that. It can also, and not disconnected from that, gratitude can help reduce pain. It can help
Interesting.
reduce our experience of pain. It can improve our sleep quality, which in itself has then consequences.
Absolutely.
It can aid us in our stress regulation as we become aware of stress. We're able to sort of call on our resources and call on our supports, which are an important way of actually managing stress. It can also help us reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. So whether we do that in the acute sense of anxiety and depression, where we're calling on a resource to help bring our parasympathetic nervous system online, or whether we're doing it more generally, that we can use it that way. Um, and it also helps us in some ways release the toxic or the negative emotions that we're experiencing, and specifically their grip on us, because we can get pretty enmeshed in negative emotions, stressful experiences, those ruminating, recurring thoughts that we may have, especially if we think that something's been going wrong. And gratefulness can help us release that. Just to give you a quick example of that, it's so easy, for example, when let's get back to this difficult shift. We've had this difficult shift. So many things were challenging. So many things could have gone wrong or did go wrong. And it's so easy for us, because of our tendency to focus on the negative, to get stuck in that rabbit hole of all the things that almost were a problem or that were a problem, the things I didn't think about, the things I didn't do, being less than, that whole scarcity mindset. And at the same time, if I'm able to pause, I can say, this is only one side of this story. Now, I'm not suggesting we go to toxic positivity and deny that anything bad happened
Right.
at work
Right.
today, right?
Right.
That is not what we're talking about. What I can acknowledge, though, is that despite the stresses and despite everything that was going on, there were also things that went well. There were people there who supported me. There were pieces of equipment that worked, or there were perhaps family members of a patient who were willing to just stand next to us while we did what we had to do, and didn't complicate the situation any more than it could have been complicated, and all of those things as we think about them can help us. And then if we aren't able to think of them real time, a practice that I recommend a lot to people in a clinical environment is as you leave your shift, before you're leaving to transition back to your home, it's so natural for us to obsess about everything we didn't get done that day, or every mistake we almost made that day, or did make that day. And transitioning that to a process of thinking about what actually went well and what are you grateful for and what would you like to acknowledge about what made this day manageable or even joyful is a practice which can help you transition very differently from work to home.
Just to dive a little deeper on that, how much difference does it make whether I just acknowledge that to myself? I think of something, oh yeah, this other thing, or versus writing it down or telling someone else. Is there any data around that?
Well, I think, as you know, I'm a great fan of expressing gratefulness. I call it the buy one, get two free strategy. When I feel, when I become aware of the things that I'm grateful for, I acknowledge them, I affirm them, I will get that gratitude benefit. When I, in an act of sort of connection to other people, take the time to express my gratefulness to somebody else, I get another benefit.
Mm.
And the person to whom I express my gratefulness also gets a benefit. And so the power of expressed gratitude is that we are actually taking the time to surface it from just that fleeting awareness of gratitude to a very intentional act of giving my gratefulness or acknowledging my gratefulness to other people.
So interesting. I think, one of the things that we sometimes hear people say when we're talking about well-being or lack thereof is I just feel so unappreciated. Nobody appreciates what I do. I work so hard, et cetera, et cetera. Which is a real felt loss or felt need for
Mhm.
many of us, like we're feeling
Mhm.
unappreciated. But I love what we're saying here about that we don't have to sit in that scarcity space, that gratitude can be operative and impactful for us, even when we feel unappreciated. Not the toxic positivity, I'll just do this all myself aspect of this, but in a space of feeling unappreciated, we can activate the energy of gratitude, as it were, in that expressive space.
Right. Well, I think I have mentioned to you once before, I think, something that I also learned from Dr. Robert Emmons, which was this arc model of gratitude and
It talks
how
about
that
that.
supports us. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I think it's sort of simple and elegant. So if you think about it, when I'm feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed or feeling underappreciated, any of those scarcity places that it's so human for us to be in at any time. Gratefulness helps us amplify the good. So that's the A. It helps us amplify the good. And that good could be things that we see in ourselves, things we see in other people, things we see in the world, things we see in our workplace. And so then when we acknowledge them and amplify them, we're kind of locking them in, right? The second the second thing it does, the R, is rescue. And we've already talked about this briefly. We, in stressful situations, can get so trapped in this spiral. It just is just the volume, it's almost like the volume of the negativity goes up. We're just locked in this sense of I don't feel appreciated, or I don't like the ungratefulness. I think people are entitled, or I'm distracted, or I'm forgetful, whatever that is. Gratefulness helps us get back into the present moment, and it helps rescue us from that sort of spiraling place that we're in.
Makes sense.
And then very important piece of it, the C, is that it connects us. It
Mm.
connects us to each other. It connects us to that sense that we have a supportive community. It connects us to that sense of a greater good. And so at all levels, gratitude is a very powerful influence on us when we're feeling less than.
I love that. I love the sort of completeness of that model, taking in all those aspects. All right, so let's say I'm sold on express gratitude. That expressing gratitude, even if I feel unappreciated, I want to lean into that. What are things I need to be thinking about in terms of how I express my gratitude? Are there specific skills or approaches to that that are important?
Well, the first thing is I don't want to give anybody performance anxiety to the extent that they never say thank you. All right. So a thank you is a great thing. It's a great place to start, as we have brainwashed our children to understand.
Absolutely.
But let's get precise about it. So the first thing I would say is that gratitude is most impactful when it's authentic, when I'm expressing it
Right.
completely authentically in a way that just feels natural for me and doesn't feel that it's being done for impact or for anybody else. It's just I'm just my natural expression of gratitude to you or to other people. I'm also a great believer in specific gratitude. So it's very easy to say, "Hey, gee, thanks, great job." Maybe even when I've been doing something with you as part of a team in the hospital, I'll say, "Oh, Lee, it was great to work with you today.
Right.
Thanks. I always appreciate it when you work with me." And that's great, and that's better than nothing. And yet, what I could say would be, for example, Lee, that situation we had that was so stressful, what I really appreciated is how you were able to stay so present and so calm and so open. And I was just really impressed by just the impact that had on all of us in that moment. That's a very different level of gratitude.
Well, and I love that the way that that impacts the receiver too, right? So when you are specific about what it was that I did or said or whatever that was helpful, it's much harder for me to get to stay in that space, that stuck space too. If, oh, she's just being nice, she says that to everyone. Well, if you tell me something specifically, if it's a specific appreciation that you observed, it couldn't have been just anyone. It was actually me. And I just, it sort of subverts our desire to, or our maybe reflex to dismiss positivity and just latch on to negativity as it were. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And it can be really influential when we express gratefulness like this. I'll give you another example. I've You and I have lived in far, far, far too many meetings where people do not listen to each other. They do not give other people the space to think or to express opinions. It's just this constantly like jumping on top of talking on top of each other, or immediately discounting somebody else's opinion. And I've actually done this publicly, and I've done it privately, depending on what I know about the person.
Sure.
But I have publicly in a meeting, when somebody has said something and somebody has actively held space for somebody to finish their thought and then taken a moment before they respond, I will actually say, "Lee, I'm really grateful for the space you held for us all to really think about what, Susan was saying,
Right.
and not just to jump on top of that."
Yeah.
And because what I'm saying is, firstly, I'm saying I saw you. I saw you do it. And I'm grateful for what you did. And I'm also grateful for the impact of what you did. And it can also, now you have to be careful because some people don't like to be outed. But you can do it generically. You could say, I would be very great. I'd be very, or I was grateful today in our meeting, just at how much space we left for each other and how much silence we left for each other to do the thinking we had to do.
Right.
We can say that more generally, but we're being very precise either about the person. In that case, I'm saying, I see you, and I see your strength, and I see your gift, and I see the impact of what you did. Or I can also be very precise about what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful when we leave space and silence for each other, because that's very tangible.
Right.
And it's also then almost a way of saying, space and silence is something that's really valuable if
Right.
we're trying to think about things.
sort of marks the
Right.
importance of
Right.
that.
Right. Okay. So then, I mean, unexpected is another one.
Oh yeah.
If I give you something or do something for you, I kind of expect you to say thank you. And if you don't, I'm like, didn't your mother teach you to say thank you?
Exactly.
Excuse me. But um, almost, when I don't expect it, I'm just doing my job and somebody says something about really acknowledging what it is that I've just done. And like working with a new grad, a new clinician who maybe is a little anxious, is not feeling very confident, but this new grad that we're working with says, I don't feel comfortable about this. I'm concerned that I don't know what I need to know here. The fact that I can say to them, well, I appreciate firstly that you spoke up and I appreciate your courage in admitting what you don't know because that's the gateway to learning.
Right.
So I've immediately sort of not just normalized, but I've actively appreciated the fact that somebody says, I don't know. Let me think about it. What else? So we did authentic, specific, timely, unexpected, personalized. So I
Okay.
think I mentioned this before. I wanted to think about how people like to be acknowledged. Some people love public recognition. They thrive on it, and kudos boards and people giving them shout outs and winning little recognitions and so on. And other people do not. And expressing gratefulness to somebody in a way that makes them cringe is not helpful.
Right.
I'm vehemently opposed, but this is a personal bias. I want to own that it's purely a personal bias. I'm vehemently opposed to things like Star of the Week or Star of the Month, where in a teamwork environment, we say, you're the superstar. We want to acknowledge you this month. Because I think when we do that, we're acknowledging one person almost at the cost of saying, well, you did this all by yourself, not the fact that we as a team created the conditions in which you were able to excel. So I always get worried about that. That's why I actually really like team acknowledgement and team awards because it's speaking more to the interdependency that we have with each other.
The
And
other
then
thing that occurs to me in that context, Carolyn, is that it also it's going back to that concept of being able to discount it. Oh, I'm the person who's the star of the week because they just needed somebody this week.
right,
So it feels less about me and more about the fact that we do this. So it had to be someone.
right, or it was luck. We've got so many nominations, and we put all of you in a jar, and
Right.
then we pull one of you out. Well, and that is at that point, it is just luck that your name got pulled.
Yeah.
So, and I think we also need to think about how we express gratefulness. You and I have talked about, the idea of muffin rage or pizza rage, right?
Right.
Where people have
Thank you,
gone
Jillian
above and
Horton.
yes, Gillian Horton's muffin rage, yes. So, so, people have gone above and beyond and above and beyond and above and beyond and above and beyond, and we send them muffins or pizzas.
Right.
And we're not really acknowledging the what it's taken for them to perform at this level. And sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't acknowledge people with something that's meaningful to them. If having a meal sent to them is important, absolutely we should. And if we
Right.
know that and we can manage it. But I think the simple act of acknowledging what we know people had to do to make it happen or what people have committed to doing, I think that's really important, and I think it gets lost when we just say, "Okay, well, let's send them a pizza or send them a box of donuts." It devalues the extent of what it is that they have truly had to contribute.
Right. It's so important because the sort of halfway gratitude or sort of token gratitude, I think, can really backfire.
Right.
Let me ask you this, Carolyn. We've talked about this a little bit before, but this notion of sort of the difference between thanks for your help with that, I appreciate it, and thanks for your help with that, I appreciate you, and how those things land very differently, and both for the speaker and for the hearer. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think I appreciate it is saying I appreciate what I received.
Mhm.
And when I say I appreciate you, it's obvious that I appreciate what it is I received. I'm appreciating you as the person who contributed to that or directly influenced that. And so that's a very different message. I don't just conditionally appreciate you for what you gave to me, but I appreciate you.
Right. I think the other piece of that that I've reflected on sometimes is that there's an almost an inherent vulnerability in shifting from the "I appreciate it" to "I appreciate you," because I'm acknowledging in some capacity my need for not just a task to be done, but for you as my fellow human being to do that and to engage with me in that way in a place of need or lack in my life.
Right. Which is what then makes it such a powerful human connector when you lean into the vulnerability and express it.
Absolutely. Okay. We know we've all come across various tools to support us in our gratitude efforts or journey, whether it's a thank you card or some other modality. But I know that there are some resources that you have really found to be helpful and recommended in the past. I'm wondering if you could summarize some of those for our listeners today.
Right. Well, maybe we can move from individual to team, if that would be a logical
Sure.
sequence.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think whatever reflection practice you can develop, that will be the first I would recommend, and that would be a gratitude reflection or a gratefulness reflection. And there are all sorts of ways to do that. I mean, there are obviously apps that, the three good things apps and all sorts of apps where we can actually go in and note gratefulness. Of course, I love Brian Sexton's three good things
Yes.
strategy because I mean, three good things was predated Brian, right? But what I love about his strategy is that the process of documenting it, you're also then attaching it to a positive emotion, one of Barbara Fredrickson's positive emotions.
Right.
And so I'm not only cognitively recognizing what the thing is that I'm grateful for, but I'm really leaning into connecting it to the emotional experience of feeling grateful for it.
Right.
So that's one way. I've actually found, having practiced that, having learnt that from Brian and practiced that, I have actually I lean very heavily into the positive emotions space. I find, and Barbara describes, 10 powerful emotions. But for example, I find that awe, AWE, awe,
Yes.
I look at something and it's what a spectacular sunrise, or I'm looking out of my window and I see birds sitting on the bird feeder, or whatever it is, or it's been so crazy and so noisy and my patient has been struggling and now suddenly they're quiet and they're peaceful and everything just settle and I can just appreciate that
Yes.
moment. So leaning into those positive emotions is something that I find very, very helpful, and especially real time to do that. So yes, journaling is another one.
Okay.
And we can buy gratitude journals and a lot of people talk about journaling every single day. I if that's something that works for you and you want to journal every day, absolutely. This is another thing that Robert Emmons has talked about, though, where he says that sometimes there can be a law of diminishing returns, where perhaps 3 times a week may be perfectly fine for you in terms of expressing gratefulness. So that's another option. But actually, writing gratitude is not a bad thing at all. Um, I have actually used gratitude writing in two distinct camps also. So gratitude, I mean, I can send, let me not get too complicated here. Let me just separate them out. So the first is I can send a note. I can actually write
Yep.
down what I'm grateful for. But as a leader, I can actually send a letter of acknowledgement or an appreciation note, an applause, recognition, whatever it is. I can actually take the moment to surface it and then write it. So I can send it to my colleague, I can send it to somebody who reports to me, and I've actually taken the time to send a note or to actually go in and put into words the appreciation that I feel for somebody. There's another practice that is the sort of the gratitude letter writing. That's different than writing a note just to somebody who's done something for you
Sure.
in the short term. But this is sort of the practice of thinking about, as you think about your life or an experience you're having, is there somebody who's really been so influential or so important in your life that you feel that maybe you haven't expressed the gratefulness to that you would like to? Maybe a mentor or somebody who was there for you in a challenging time, somebody who encouraged you to lean into a stretch goal, whatever that is, right?
Right. Right.
And we're reflecting on, gosh, that person really made a difference at that point, and to actually sit down and write them a letter and say, I've been reflecting and I'm thinking about this. And well, firstly, that's going to be unexpected when it arrives. But when it
Absolutely.
arrives, what a lovely gift that you've given them. So there are all those practices. Now, I have actually used great gratitude letters personally, and also working with people who have had difficult experiences, stressful experiences, difficult experiences, maybe a difficult person in their lives, or perhaps they've had a failure of some sort that feels that it's a hurdle. And we can actually almost write letters to the person or to the experience. Now, these are not letters we send. But for example, I have somebody that I've worked with who always allows me to tell this story, not that you'll ever know who this is, which is they've always said that they had a voice in their head, and that was a certain person's voice that always doubted them. So when they would find themselves in tricky situations, they would get this a sense of imposter
Sure.
syndrome,
Yeah.
because their relative's voice in their head was saying, well, you really shouldn't take this risk. They're not going to take you seriously. I mean, after all, you don't have enough power, and you don't have enough this, and you don't have that. And my colleague recognized that this voice, and in some ways was well intentioned, as trying to save you from yourself and protect you, but it
Sure.
was no longer relevant or helpful.
Right.
And so she wrote a letter to this person. She knew who this person was, saying, I really appreciate that you want to keep showing up to protect me. And you did that when I was younger. And I really don't need you to protect me in this situation, but thank you for caring about me. Wrote the letter, and then actually ended up shredding it. But it was a way of actually acknowledging that this thing that was so unhelpful now to her as an older adult was something that had echoes of the past, and she was able to acknowledge it for what was well intentioned when it was well intentioned, and then let it
Let it
go.
go. Yeah.
Let it go.
Love that. That's a fantastic. Any other resources we should share with our listeners?
The gratefulness.org is a lovely resource. We can link that in the show notes. That has all sorts of resources about the practice of gratefulness. It has videos. It has a wonderful video by Brother David Steindl Rice called A Good Day. That is something that if you want to just feel generally good, it's something that is worth watching. There's also a version of it that was made with Brother David Steindl Rice's meditation, and then just wonderful videography by the filmmaker Louis Schwartzberg. So that's also, we can link that. That's also just a beautiful experience. But on gratefulness.org, you can actually request a daily gratitude reflection prompt.
Okay.
So that could be sent to you. And if that's something that, if you're one of these people who, if it pops up in your inbox in the morning, you're more likely to remember it, that's something. And then I would very much recommend some of Dr. Emmons' books, Dr. Robert Emmons' books. He's got a really tiny little one that if you don't want to be reading a great big book, he's got one that's literally called The Little Book of Gratitude.
Nice.
But the one that I really like a lot is Gratitude Works. And then, of course, he's also got endless peer-reviewed publications about his research in this space. But I find his work very accessible. But then there's all sorts of resources, as I say, at gratefulness.org.
Fantastic.
You can also do things like look at the best great gratitude TED Talks. I mean, it's all over the place. But the reason I'm recommending gratefulness.org is because gratitude.org is no, it's actually grateful. It's gratefulness.org. And the reason I'm recommending gratefulness.org is because what we've been talking about today is actually gratefulness. It's not that just quick, more hokey gratitude. It's the act of grateful living and grateful awareness that is what is really the thing that influences well-being.
We're just looking for our listeners. It's grateful.org, grateful.org. And we'll link it in the show notes too.
So it's changed. Even since I looked at it last time, it's changed to grateful.org.
Just grateful.org.
Yeah.
But Brother David Stendhal Rast is right there, so I'm sure it's the right one. Carolyn, I am grateful to you for this conversation. And I know our listeners are too. What a joy to talk about this critical practice in appreciating each other and the world around us, and maintaining our well-being. Thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. As always, please feel free to reach out with comments or questions or ideas for future podcasts. We hope to see you soon.
Right. And I'm so grateful for you, as you know. And I'm also grateful to everybody who just takes a moment to listen to this and then pass on the gift of gratitude to the people in your lives.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
So that's it for today. If you enjoyed what you heard, please share this podcast with a colleague. And as always, we welcome your feedback.
If there are any topics you'd like to hear about, please email us at owb@jhmi.edu.